the Tracer Podcast, your inside track to all things franchising. We provide essential resources for anyone in the franchising world. Let's get into it.
All right, so we're going to talk about the franchise matching process if you work with me. This process is for serious searchers, okay? This process is going to take time, it's going to take effort, and it'll take some significant thought. I don't want to tell you what franchise to invest in, okay? I want to arm you with the knowledge and the tools so that you can make a good decision for yourself. This will create better outcomes and will ensure you fully know what to expect if you choose to move forward with a franchise. You don't need to be pulling money out of your wallet and demanding I give you a franchise like right now to start this matching process. You don't need any of that stuff, okay? What you do need to be at this point where you're going to move forward if you find a franchise that meets all your needs, okay? Where you can calmly say, hey, I'm ready to be an owner as long as I can find the right business for me. If you're there and you're willing to commit to the couple hours a week that you're going to need to do for calls and research, okay, then we're going to find you the right fit. If you're dabbling and you want me to just tell you what to invest in, right? Just be there, oh, you should do this, you should do that. Find somebody else, okay? For those of you that are saying, but Josh, I am a dabbler, okay? I don't want to go through this process. That's totally okay. We have a database of information that you can go through. We're adding more every day. You can check out my LinkedIn where I write a bunch of articles. You can check out my blog on tracerfranchising.com. You can listen to the podcast, the Tracer Podcast. You can sign up for my newsletter. Right? There's a lot of stuff that you can do to get information. And then when you are ready, if you see something that jumps out at you, in one of the deep dives I do on these franchises, you're like, hey, you know what? I really like this one. I'm willing to go through this research process. Awesome. Okay. Then let me know, and then we're going to get to work. Okay. So here's what the process would look like if you do decide to work with me. I'm going to give you it's like a survey to fill out. Those questions within the survey is what we're going to discuss today. Okay. It's very in depth, and we're going to go over it so you know what to think through once those questions get asked to you and why I'm asking them. Okay. And these questions are going to cover both the art and the science of selecting a franchise. And then once you go through those, I'll review them and we'll discuss your long-term goals, your skills, your financial situation, how much you want to invest, the business model preferences, and all that, and much more, right? Just to verify that what you put in the survey, is 100%, you haven't thought about and changed your mind, as well as I ask a few clarifying questions as well. So we're going to get into a lot more criteria in just a second of what all this means. Okay. Next, I'm going to take all the information. I'm going to find you as many good fits as possible. So I'll take all those potential fits and I'm going to check to see if there are territories available where you live. And then if they are, I'll present you the best ones that are available near you. All right, so let's get now into what I call the art and the science of choosing the right franchise. Okay, and we're going to go through starting off with understanding sales. So when you're considering franchise ownership, picking the right industry, it's not guesswork. It is a strategic blend of art and science, and you're going to want an industry that aligns with your skills, which is the art, while also meeting measurable criteria that ensure kind of growth and the ability for you to get going in your market, which is more of the science. Okay, so when I say art, we're going to cover sales, customer relationships, leveraging your personal experience, things like that. The science addresses market size, growth potential, recurring revenue streams, profit margins, barrier to entry, resilience during downturns, as well as a competitor analysis. Okay, so we're going to get into sales here first. So let's talk about it. Okay, and I understand most professionals they cringe at the thought of sales. It evokes memories of awkward pitches and pressure-filled presentations. Here's the good news: most modern selling isn't about being pushy. It's about solving real problems. Unfortunately, few of us encounter the stereotypical used car salesman on a daily basis, unless you're buying used cars daily. In which case, I'm intrigued. Tell me about that business model, right? But seriously, most businesses truly aim to match customers with what they actually need. Okay, so it's not this ickiness. So let's get that out of the way, and let's talk about the different kind of sales that you're going to have to do as an owner of a small business. So the first one would be B2B sales. Okay, these are professional sales where you're likely cold outreaching or networking your way into a business owner's office. You're offering them a service or a product that they need, right? Maybe they don't know they need it because they don't know it exists, but you know that you can save them a lot of money if they use you, or it's something that you can provide better, cheaper, faster than whatever competitor that they're using. So this sale, it's all about finding pressing issues and figuring out how you can resolve it for them. And if you can't, then no worries. You're not being pushy. You're truly just finding out if you can help them. And that way, if you can help them, the sale's kind of a no-brainer. So within this type of sales, there's a continuum from fun to serious. So for example, if you have a mobile kids sports business selling to preschools, you're going to go to those preschools. Same thing. You're cold calling, knocking on those doors, going in to talk to the owner, but you're talking about soccer or dance or whatever. It's kind of fun. And then you have that are the more serious sales, right? So there's some franchises that do cost cutting, where they can say, hey, we'll go in, we'll negotiate and cut your utilities or whatever it is, and we get half the savings for a couple years. Okay. So this is really just about the numbers and clearly communicating how you can achieve the savings to make you seem like what you're offering is real. Okay. So both of these require you to cold call on businesses and then to sell them a service. Again, it's just on that continuum of how much fun is the service versus how much is just about the numbers. Okay. So number two, so we had B2B sales. Number two is homeowner sales. All right. So homeowner, I usually cut these into two as well. So you have a homeowner who has a need, right? Or you have a homeowner who has a want, right? So for the needs, think of things like plumbing, electrical, HVAC, restoration, things like that. Okay. They have to get this solved. And they'll usually go with the first person that they find on Google who picks up, as long as their insurance works with them. So for the owner, your sales job really is just to oversee digital marketing, make sure your crew does a phenomenal job, and ask for Google reviews when the job's done. Right? Eventually, you'll probably have a manager who's going to do all this stuff, but usually it's going to be you at the start. You're going to also kind of network and cold call with referral partners. So you want property managers being the one that call you if any of their tenants have issues. All right, so the next thing, those are needs. Next thing would be nice to haves. So think of window coverings, floors, lawns, maid services, right? These things that aren't essential but make people's lives better. They'll usually require a quote. So the customer's calling a few different service providers that they saw on social media or they saw on Google to come out to their home and give them a quote. So they're not always looking for the cheapest option. Some of them are, but usually what they're looking for is the best value. This is their biggest investment. They want to make sure someone's going to take care of their home, not just give them the cheapest thing possible. Your job is to understand what they want on really an emotional level and make them see you as the one who can deliver that. You're going to talk to them about their home, about their dreams, their preferences, their families, right? Talk to them about their life. And if they're confident that you're going to take care of them better than anyone else, they're probably going to choose you, again, even if you aren't the cheapest. All right, so those are homeowner sales. So we had B2B sales, we had homeowner sales. Now we're going to talk about consumer sales. This is usually when a consumer needs something and they're going to go to a location to get it. Highly dependent on marketing, highly dependent on where you put it in terms of like the geographic, the physical location. Brand name recognition is important, as well as a lot of local networking. The owner is going to ensure the marketing is hitting all the KPIs. They're probably spending a large percent of their revenue on ads. The owner is also ensuring customer service is absolutely tip top. Because let's say you have a auto body shop, they can go into you, or they can go to the guy across the street, right? They're going to go to the person they feel is going to take care of them the best. Hardware stores, I think this is the best example, actually. Most people had an experience at Ace, at Home Depot, or at Lowe's that makes them go to that one store over and over again. Even if they've moved to a totally different city and they're not going to the same Home Depot, right? I can tell you when I was 16, I had this project where I had to build a trebuchet, and this Home Depot employee walked me through everything. They picked out all the things I needed, told me how to measure it. And almost 20 years later, I hate shopping at any store except for Home Depot because I just love going in there because of the service that I get. Okay, so the other thing that these owners have to do is community relationships and networking. So you want to meet referral partners, you want to sponsor teams, you want to host booths at events. You really want people to know that you exist so that they're more likely to go to your store. All right, so final thoughts here. Nearly every franchise opportunity falls clearly into one of these types of sales. And if you're saying, hey, what about Amazon? They do stuff online. Well, if you can just sell stuff online, you're not going to be a franchise. So nice try, though. So as you start your franchise research, really ask yourself, what type of sales best aligns with my strengths? It's a simple question, but it's very important to choosing a franchise that you're going to thrive in. All right, so next after sales is customers. Who do you want to serve? And so let's break this up again. It's going to be similar to the sales, right, of who you want to sell to. So do you want to sell to small businesses? So this means you enjoy working with other business owners. This is the type of customer can be a blessing and a curse. That you can relate to these owners because you're also a small business owner, so it's fun and it's fulfilling. But on the other hand, the tolerance of business owners is basically zero if these are non-essential expenses. So you really have to build trust and you have to demonstrate how your product or service is going to save them costs or it's going to increase their revenue, and you're going to provide high quality while you're doing that. Okay, so this can be challenging when you're just getting going, but once you have a client and you've proven that you can do quality work and that you're actually saving them money or you're actually increasing their revenue, that customer is probably going to be your customer for life, and they're probably friends with other small businesses, and you're going to start seeing kind of like a snowball effect. Example of franchises who service small businesses would be business coaches, payroll firms, cost-cutting analysis, janitorial services, window washing, line striping, marketing, those types of things. Okay, the next, who do you want your customer to be? Just like sales, do you want to sell to homeowners? Well, your next customer could be a homeowner. So think franchises sell to homeowners, offering a service, whether it's that need-based service that we spoke about, where you're the hero of the hour, providing a needed service when something breaks, plumbing, electrical, restoration, HVAC, potentially pest removal. Your business is on call. So you're on call 24/7 to respond to crises, allowing you to aid people in their time of need, which can be fulfilling, but it's also fraught with customers who are on edge. They have a family or are trying to survive in 110-degree heat and the AC went out. They're just want their AC to get fixed. So they might be a little bit on edge. Or someone who suffered water damage, pipes burped in their basement. They've lost some of sentimental value. Those guys aren't exactly happy that you're showing up, right? They're glad to get the job done, but they're probably in a pretty bad place mentally. So they're going to be deeply grateful to you, right, that you're there at 2 a.m., but they also might just be pissed off at the situation in general and kind of direct their anger at you, right? So either way, you don't have a choice but to get the issue resolved and to do as best job as you can, right? Usually their insurance is paying for it, so they aren't hassling you about costs. So that is kind of nice as well, right? So kind of think about, the pros and cons there. And then in the nice to have types of businesses, these are where typically they're pretty happy about this because you're offering them an upgrade, you're offering something that makes their life easier, it makes their house more beautiful. Like I said, window coverings, flooring, kitchen or bathroom models, maid services, lawn care, mosquito misting, painting, right? All this stuff. The owner wants to feel like you've really heard them, and they want their preferences validated. They expect a really high level of quality, and as long as you deliver on that, they're usually really grateful and the job's done. They're going to give you a 5-star review and they're going to tell other friends how awesome you are. Here, you're going to have a mix of customers who are cost focused and others who are quality focused, right? Most people are somewhere in between. And you'll have to work with them to find a solution that matches their budget as well as their personal taste. Okay, so there might be a little negotiation, a little bit of like, hey, you want this is the most expensive one, but there's this thing that's one tier down that meets your budget and you can barely even tell it's not the same thing. Okay. You'll have some people who make your employees a meal. They're just happy they're there. And you're going to have some who are going to blame the mess that their dog made on your employees. So you have a little bit of this mix as well. There's pros and cons to both of these. All right. So the next demographic after homeowners we're going to talk about is seniors. It's a growing demographic, right? Some people call it the silver tsunami. They're often referred to as a monolith, but I'm going to break this up as well into kind of the younger seniors. They've got money to spend. And then the older seniors, especially the ones on Medicaid, right? The younger and more affluent seniors, they want their own spaces. So like fitness for that are more senior focused, med spas, they're more senior focused, doing Botox and this kind of like anti-aging type of stuff. And you have the older population who want to age in place. And they're either going to pay out of pocket or they're going to have Medicaid, which is largely the case for like in-home care, maybe senior daycares, transportation services, accessibility upgrades to their home. Right. So a different type of person. They're really getting older. They're not as mobile and they need a little extra help, right? And a lot of times that's paid for by insurance. Again, pros and cons to that. Okay, so the next demographic we're going to talk about is children. This category incorporates all ages. So ages, think 1 to 18. So it could be athletics, it could be education, it could be recreational. So sports, daycares, tutoring, STEM after-school programs, coding would be part of that. Music lessons, trampoline parks, right? Any activity that a child does outside of school, there's probably a franchise for it. And if you love working with kids, that can be a very strong demographic. Next would just be like, I would call this like the general consumer. So it's the catch-all for a business that sells things based on interest, kind of rather than a specific demographic. So like think of food. So how would you describe a person who eats at McDonald's, right? Really, other than like they're a person who likes McDonald's, there's not a really good way to describe them, because they could be a homeowner or they could be homeless. They could be old or they could be young. They could be rich or they could be poor, right? Like everybody likes McDonald's unless you're super health conscious. So it's just kind of like this general consumer catch-all. Right? So this goes into food, retail, just kind of like general store stuff. So if you want something that kind of has this mass appeal, right, that's the consumers. Next, we have car owners, massive demographic. They span many different business models. Car ownership is almost a requirement for adulthood in America, right? Like you got to drive places because you can't just walk there. The average age of a vehicle is like 12 years old. And then new car prices are just going up, but so are the reliability of vehicles, right? So there's just more and more demand for servicing automobiles. So think oil change, before you go, oh, electric vehicles, well, like electric vehicles are still like 5% or less of the total vehicle population. So we got a long way to go before oil changes are going to go the way of the dodo. You have repair shops, electric or not, like you get in an accident, you got to get repaired. You have tinting shops, you have aftermarket parts, you have tire stores, all these things are going to automotive. And then the last one, this is kind of like your interest. So this could be a subset under consumer, but I'm going to say it warrants its own section, because many people start looking at franchising and say, oh, I love XYZ, and I want to get into that industry. And honestly, this really depends on your goals, but I rarely advise people to just get into something because they're passionate about it without looking at the broader market. Look at gyms. Gyms are a great example. They're something that's very hard to scale, ton of competition. People are like, oh, I love fitness. Well, you know what? Instead of owning a gym, why not get something that provides a much better ROI, that has less competition? You don't have to wake up at 4 o'clock to run a 5 o'clock class. And it affords you the ability to set your own schedule so you can work out whenever you feel like during the day, and you can afford the $500 fitness center that you want to go to that has all the fancy schmancy, amenities. Sounds like a much better life to me. But anyway, if this is something you want to go towards because you just love this thing and, you're like, hey, you know what? I just really want to be in this. It's how I want to spend my time. Well, that's fine. There's tons of franchises like this. So some of these are actually in booming industries, right? That are very scalable. So I don't want to like talk you out of your passion. Just you have to be objective if your goal is to scale. But if your goal is just to be in this industry because you love it, and you're happy with one location and it meets whatever, minimum amount you need to make every day, and it gets you really fired up, well, then, let's look at them. So examples here could be bars. It could be hobby shops. It could be certain types of gyms. It could be pet-related businesses. It could be specialty shops. It could be something that's like so simple that you have your teenage kids running the majority of it, or other kind of niches that you really like. So those are all the different types of customers that you need to think about. The next thing is, how do you want to get paid? Right. So this is, a lot of people don't think about this, but it's a really big part of the business. So if you want to get paid, let's say through insurance, you're going to know the rate. You're definitely going to get paid, right? As long as you fill out the paperwork properly. But it's going to take you 60 plus days after you've done the work, and only if the paperwork's submitted properly. Otherwise, it might be 60 days after you do your fixes. Okay. Typically, you're talking about need-based businesses. Usually, you're on an insurance approved vendor list, right? And so you have to have the homeowner choose you, like we spoke about. You're the one that they called, and you're on their insurance list. Great. And now the franchise should help you with both of these, right? Get on the insurance list and help you get customers. But the focus here again is on the capital. Right? So with the capital, you're gonna need a lot of working, just like extra cash. Because if you're not getting paid for the first 60 days of your business, but you have a crew of guys working every single day on projects, you need the cash to be able to pay them until you get paid. And the more jobs you do, the more hours you're going to work, and the more capital you're going to need. Maybe there's so much demand, you could have 3 crews running, but you're running out of cash and go bankrupt if you do that, right? So something you got to think about, if you want to go that route, is am I going to have the working capital, or am I going to have the patience to say no to jobs to make sure that I can manage this cash flow, right? It also requires a little bit of financial acumen to be able to model those things. It's not just labor. You're paying your rent and all the other expenses. So it's something that you really have to think about, and you have to monitor before you make a decision if I want to get into this business or not. Now, this complexity is both a strength and a weakness, because it blocks unsophisticated business owners from getting into the business, or it stops them from staying long term because they run out of money. But the weakness is that the businesses the ones who figure it out are highly motivated and they're a little bit more sophisticated than just your random guy. Okay. So that's, again, pros and cons to all of these. You just got to figure out what you want. Next is you get paid by cash. And when I say cash, I just mean you're getting paid that day. So credit card, whatever, but you immediately get the money. Okay. Very simple business model. You provide your product or service, you get paid. This will usually have the highest level of competition, but also your competition isn't that sophisticated. Okay. So it might be easy to grab some market share here because they're living check to check and there's no planning that they really have to do. All right. The next one is B2B. Okay, so typically B2B is going to be on a net 30 or a net 60, so you're going to not get paid for 30 to 60 days. Not as bad as insurance, but still, you still have to do that cash flow management. Okay, so this one is still more complicated than just getting paid in cash, but you're also going to have to follow up on these business owners because some of them are going to be dealing with their own cash flow management issues, and some of them might wait the full 3 days plus the 7-day penalty period, whatever. So there's a little bit to that as well, and then you have. Do you want to get paid on a recurring basis or a project basis? And there's a spectrum between recurring contract-based revenue and these once-in-a-lifetime purchases. So think a multi-year contract where a business or municipality pays monthly for a service as on the far end of the spectrum. Like, you're locked into this contract with this company or government for 4 years, and you're going to get paid every quarter like clockwork. That's like the most recurring locked-in revenue possible. And then on the far end of the spectrum would be like building a pool for somebody. They're not going to have you come back and build a second pool in their backyard. So just kind of giving you examples that what's along this spectrum from the most recurring to the least. Think annual contracts for janitorial services would be kind of close to those long-term contracts. Next would be month-to-month contracts. So maybe like you're spraying for mosquitoes and they can quit whatever month they feel like it. Think about reliable referral partners would be the next one. So you have in-home care and you're getting these referrals. You get 5 referrals a month from this PT office that are sending you people like clockwork. They could just turn it off whenever they feel like it. There's nothing locked in, but it feels relatively stable. Next would be reliable repeat customers. Like maybe you have some sort of specialty shop and people have to go there for that thing. And there's this really loyal base of customers that are going to go in on a weekly basis. Next would be like sporadic customers. So maybe a restaurant where people love the food. They come in like once a month, twice a month, something like that. And then lastly would be like kind of one-off with the possibility of an upsell. So like window covering. So you go in because you get called for one window, for one room, and then you can say, hey, maybe you want these others, and they'll call you back in a month and do the other ones. But eventually you're going to run out of blinds in the house and that's it. Then lastly would be those project ones. So again, one is more marketing, one's a lot more sales. So if you want to get those contracts, you got to be a good salesperson to convince them that they should go with you over everyone else bidding. Whereas if you want these like one-off projects, you need to be really good at marketing because they're Googling it and they're looking at your reviews. And then you have to be good in the sales when you show up for the quote. Okay. Okay. The next one. So we've looked at who do you want to sell to? How do you want to get paid? Who do you want to serve it? Who do you want your customer to be? Next, we're going to talk about employees, right? So who do you want working for you? Do you want white collar employees? So think like office workers handling computer and thought work, payroll, taxes, consulting are kind of examples. The skill can be taught often. Next would be blue collar. So people with some sort of trade skill. They're paid well, but they can be hard to find. So like plumbers, electricians, HVAC techs, CDL drivers, right? Things like that. Next would be the general population. Anyone who has the personality for your business could be hired. And maybe there's like a few like low barriers to entries. So think like food, teaching soccer to kids, in-home care, retail, stuff like that, right? And then so once you decide like what kind of employees you want, ask yourself how many. So are you okay with a business that requires a large number of employees, especially as you grow? So especially, senior care, kid services, maid services, non-technical services, things like that, or something where it's very few employees. So you'll have a few well-paid employees that are either really skilled because they're producing a lot of revenue per hour because it's a very skilled trade that they know, or they're like amazing salespeople and you're just going out and you're selling the crap out of something, and then you're having contractors to go and actually do the work, and your focus is just getting these amazing salespeople who are just crushing it. So these guys usually work full-time. They're going to produce enough revenue to justify their higher salaries. So they are a high overhead. And so you need to get them enough work if it's a trade one, or you need them to get enough leads if they're sales, and you need to get them it quickly to justify having them on your books. And then do you want these guys to be full-time? So you can have a dedicated staff. They get paid independently of the work that they produce, and it's really, again, it's dependent on you to get them work that justifies their salary. So you need to, if that's what you want and you want full-time workers from the get-go, you're gonna have to come to the table with the capital to pay them until you ramp up, or you have to say like, hey, I'm going to do this work until I can build enough work for myself that I can replace myself with somebody else that's making this much money. Um, okay. Uh, there'll be more these full-time employees will be more dedicated and reliable than part-time employees, and so you'll usually have lower turnover. All right, and then maybe you want part-time work because your labor costs become almost like a variable cost because they're only working when you have work for them. There's no, you're not paying them like a salary or anything like that. So you only hire them as you need them. You only give them hours when there's work to do, and so it creates a leaner business model. But typically you're gonna have higher turnover. It's gonna be harder to find people. Most people want full-time jobs. And when you start adding in all your costs on like Indeed, and training, and then fixing whatever mess if someone wasn't doing a good job and you fired them, sometimes it could end up being the same as if you just had someone on salary, right? So it's something you need to figure out if the franchise is a really good way to like hire and onboard these people. Now, if it's a passion-based business, like kids or pets or fitness, it might not be as big of an issue for part-time work because those guys are there because they love it. They're not there because they want to make a ton of money. Okay. So now, once you've decided what kind of employees I want and how much I want, the next big thing to think about is your experience. So what have you been successful at in the past, right? They say history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. If you've been the number one salesman for the last 10 years at your company, you should probably look at a franchise that relies on a killer salesman to be successful. If you hate speaking with new people, but see the world in like optimization patterns, then you should probably find a franchise that requires a great ops manager. Okay. So that's the last thing is once you have all the other items, is like make sure it's a really good fit for your skills. Okay. All right. So that's the art. All those things go into the art of this. The next one would be the science. So let's break this down into looking at the market. The first one would be the growth. Okay. So you can look at them. Are they growing? So 5% annual growth year over year over year. Are they stagnating, which might be like 0 to 4%? I mean, 4% is still really good, maybe like 0 to 3%, and then declining. So anything less than 0. So the more the growth, the easier it's going to be to create a profitable business and have that business grow year over year. So you really want to pick a growing industry because it honestly means anyone with like a half decent product or service is going to grow. Now, if you pick a stagnant industry, then only the best are going to grow. Everyone else is fighting for scraps. So if it's a stagnant industry, but everyone there is unsophisticated, they suck, everyone's complaining about how much they wish there was someone who could actually just do a good job, well, go in there and clean up. But if you have good competitors, then it's going to be hard to grow year over year over year because the market's not growing. Then lastly, we have the declining industry. So you just need to stay away from these. Even geniuses lose in the declining industry. Okay. There's a famous story about this like top tech guy who's working for Google or Facebook or something like that. He leaves his high-paying job to build out this tech product and launch a business. And he built the best product out there, and he gains 5% market share every single year, right? 5% the first year, 10% he has. The second year, he's got 15 the third year, and so on. But he hits this plateau in like 3 or 4 years, and then it starts actually declining. And so why did this happen? Well, he did it because his tool was a digital tool that helped print newspapers run more efficiently, which at the time were declining like 20% every single year. So even though he was just crushing it and just getting more and more clients, so many clients were going out of business that he ended up actually making less money, and he himself had to shut down after 4 or 5 years. So really, like, as you can see from that story, I know 20% is a lot for a decline. It's unlikely. However, any type of declining market, you just need to stay away from. Okay, so that's the science there. The other thing is you're picking you're picking an industry where the size of your territory is kind of gone into that factor as well. So you're going to get a general gist of the territory sizes and the market before you pick individual franchises. But as you learn more about them, you're going to figure out exactly how big the territories are and how the franchise cuts them up and who the franchise serves, right? So to give you an example, you might know that a residential painting business is for homeowners. So you're like, okay, I'm just going to look and see how many homes I have in my territory. There's 100,000 homes in my territory, whatever, right? And after you speak with a franchisor and franchisees, you find out that actually most customers live in a home that's 15 years old or older. They've been in place for over 5 years, right? But where you live is actually a very transient place, and the average home is 10 years old, and the average person stays there for 4 years. Well, all of a sudden, what you thought was a great territory turns out to not be a very good territory. Okay, next we have brick and mortar businesses versus mobile businesses. So with a brick and mortar business, you ask how big is the industry in your territory, but then you need to figure out what you can actually capture and then figure out how much you can make. Okay. So like you might say, oh, I've got this territory and it's got all these people in it, blah, 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 blah. But you're a gym and most people won't drive more than, I think it was like 11 minutes last study I saw to get to a gym. And then you have to really see, okay, well, within this 11-minute drive time, how many people can I realistically get to go to my gym? And then I know what my overhead is and all this stuff. So what's my, what am I actually making here? All right. And then some franchisees, won't look at who you're selling to or the specific demographic. They're just going on population, right? So let's say it's a B2B business and they're going off of 250,000 people. And in one territory it might be 200 businesses, but in your territory it's 80 that actually match your customer profile, right? So this very well could be a non-viable territory. So with these brick and mortar businesses, you really need to be careful of how the franchise is cutting it up and then looking deeper of who your true customer is and if this lines up. Okay. Okay. Next, we're going to talk into mobile businesses. And this one you do kind of like in reverse, because in a mobile business, you could have 10 territories and service them with the same crew potentially, depending on how far away your territories are. So say, hey, I want to make, fill in the blank, X amount of money. How much of the market can I capture based off of what I've heard from other franchisees? And then how big is this market per territory? So let's say you think you can net $100,000 per territory, and I'm literally just making this up for easy math, and you know that in 5 years you want to make $500,000. Well, then buy 5 territories. Like it's very simple. It's not like a gym where they have to be within 10 minutes of where you park your trucks at night. It's mobile. You're going to go to them. So your employees only scale as your business scales. So 5 territories doesn't mean you're going to have to use 5 times the initial capital as when you start your first territory. However, 2 territories of a restaurant is literally 2 times whatever the first one cost. Okay. Maybe a little bit less because you have employees that work at both or something like that, but it's roughly going to be 2 times. And then lastly, like, let's make this even more clear, okay, of why it's a totally different calculus for mobile. Let's say you're looking at a second territory and you're like, you know what, if I buy that territory, I'm probably only going to net $45K a year because it's not a great territory. My first territory that I'm in, it can do $150,000 a year. So like, why in the world would I buy that second territory? Who would want it? Well, if it's a brick and mortar location and you need $300,000 to build out and launch it, no one's going to want that territory. But if it's a mobile and you can easily service that kind of second not great territory with the employees and vehicles you have, and the franchise fee is $40,000, it means you can get a full ROI plus some in the first year, and everything else is just gravy. So why wouldn't you get that second territory? So those are the kind of, you really have to think about this of how you're going to do it, okay? Of how you're going to, of what model you're going to approach and what territories are good, not good, and if it's going to be viable to have these businesses in the specific territory you're looking at or not. So now you're saying, okay, well, how do I know if it's going to be $150,000 or $45,000 territory? Like, what am I looking at? Well, as you go through the process and you talk to franchisees, you should start asking them, like, what are the key KPIs that they need to look for? Okay. With AI, the research is becoming easier, but there's, but regardless, as you start to narrow down on the franchises, you're going to figure out what those KPIs are. Okay. And so then you're going to look at the market in your area based off of those KPIs, right? So maybe it's like homeowners who make at least $100,000 a year, or maybe it's the number of private schools, or maybe it's like the number of businesses that employ people that employ between 10 and 50 people or something like that, right? So you're going to figure out whatever that number is of that key demographic, and you're going to multiply the number of those people that you could realistically service. So maybe there's 1 million people, but you can realistically service half of that, because half of them, even though they're a homeowner, they only get the service done every other year, like whatever it is. So you figure out like a realistic number of people within that market who are going to buy it, any 1 year. And then, so you take that number and you multiply it by the cost of what your product or service is. So if realistically, let's say just make the numbers easier. There's 2 million people in your territory, but they buy whatever your service is once every other year. Realistically, there's 1 million people who are going to buy it at any one time, and it costs $100 on average. Then in your territory, you have a $100 million territory. And then you're going to look at your competitors relative to the market size, and you're going to see, if there's one other competitor, then there's a lot of meat on that bone. If there's 1,000 other competitors, then there's an issue. Okay, so it's not just market size, because would you rather be in a $1 billion market with 10,000 competitors, or a $10 million market with 10 competitors? So you really have to do that math. And then towards the end of the research process, then you're going to mystery shop a lot of these competitors, and you're going to see if they provide a quality service. Because maybe there is 1,000 competitors, but none of them answer their phone, and they all are rude as hell when you walk into their store. So then it doesn't really matter, because you're gonna offer a much better service than they are. Okay. And so now that you know what you're looking for, where are you going to find the data? Sometimes it's public, it's, government data. Sometimes it's paid for. So look at studies, look at trade publications, sites, other adjacent providers. Sometimes potential competitors will offer industry analysis on their website to show how smart they are, and you can use that. Just get creative, right? Find the data. It's one of these, business owners are resourceful. Most franchises will provide some sort of demographic study, but it's very high level, right? And honestly, they do that because they want every territory to be sold. However, the difference between an okay territory and a great territory could be 6 figures of the bottom line, right? With the exact same amount of effort. So it's worth paying for this data if you're unsure of if you're going to have a good territory or not. All right, so just pay for the feasibility study, pay for whatever website you access the data, whatever it is, to be sure that this data is good. A feasibility study by an outside professional firm would be like $5,000. There's some websites for a couple $100 you get really good data. Okay, so at an absolute minimum, have a deep research AI tool give you the analysis. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about here is recurring revenue, right? So this is the science. So you either need to be the best at marketing, or you need to get recurring revenue, right? It's kind of the way I see it. So this really is a personal preference. What can't be negotiated is that businesses that get recurring revenue need excellent salespeople, and those that get project-based revenue need amazing marketing, right? So as you're getting to know the franchisor and your skills, you got to figure out kind of where you fit in that. Recurring revenue businesses, they do sell for a higher multiple. So if you're looking for a really big exit, the recurring revenue is going to be probably going to be key for you. But it's something that needs to be validated by franchisees. So a lot of, whether it's the marketing side, whether it's the sales side, a lot of franchises will have in their websites or whatever. They're like, oh, we're a marketing company that just happens to be in the XYZ business. Well, everybody says that, but you got to really do your due diligence to find out if that's true. Okay, so after recurring revenue, let's talk about margins. So bigger margins give you more leeway to make mistakes. They give you more leeway to hire people, maybe for a little bit more than market value. You're making more money than someone else who's doing the exact same amount of sales. And so it might be in the FDD. Most FDDs just have revenue. So you're going to have to talk to franchisees. The franchisor can't tell you anything that's not in the FDD. So you got to get the numbers from the franchisees. So, find out what are first-year franchise owners doing? What are 5-year franchise owners doing? What are the most competent owners doing versus the least competent owners doing in terms of margins? Because you could have the same business and one person can be running at 10%, one person can be running at 30%. It's just based off of the competency of the owner. And you need to know yourself well enough to know, okay, when I come in, am I going to run this super tight ship from day one? Or do I need a bigger buffer because I need to learn business ownership on top of all the other things that go into this business? And unfortunately, there are industry norms that you can look at, but some franchises that look similar on the surface have massively different margins. So you really, truly do have to speak to franchisees to figure this out. And when you're doing that, just so you know, many franchisees aren't great at finance. So they won't know the difference between gross margin, gross profit, and net profit, right? And if you don't know, it's fine, right? Just be explicit about what you're asking for. right? Ask and find out the franchisees will say, oh, I make 10% margins, but they pay themselves a $200,000 salary, right? So you got to ask about that. You got to ask about, what personal things they run through the business. Do they have children on staff? All these things will go into this, and all of these questions are part of the app that I've given you, but you really need to figure out on a franchise by franchise basis what the margins are. The next thing that you're going to look at is barriers to entry. So barriers to entry create a moat around your company. So it's hard for the average person to cross. It's going to make your business more valuable when you exit, and it's going to reduce the amount of competition. Okay. It's also going to make it harder for you to enter the market. So you just need to be ready to overcome those challenges. So decide what barriers are important to you, or you don't want any barriers. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to go out and provide a really great service in a huge market. The next, so some barriers to entry are like capital. So if it's very capital intensive, it's going to prevent people who don't have the money to be able to open up stores, right? In-person stores are more expensive than online stores, so there's more competition online. You can start a power washing business for cheap, but if your business has special trucks that are designed specifically for super fast power washing, you'll have a competitive advantage because your truck and a truck can't afford a $100,000 van that power washes things on its own in 2 seconds, whatever. The next barrier to entry is complexity. Some businesses have complex operations or finance. So it requires a person with skills to run these things successfully. So they can be business ownership skills, financial operation skills, nunchuck skills. No, I'm just kidding on that one. But it could be whatever the skills are. So the complexity will prevent competitors from trying to enter, or it's just going to cause them to fail. Okay. So these businesses really should only be entered if the franchise system is proven, and you've talked to a ton of franchisees who've had no experience before and are successful now. Another barrier to entry is licensing. So some businesses require you or your staff to have certain licenses to run the business. This could be contractor licenses, insurance approval licenses, like Medicaid, trade certifications, or something else. These industries mean labor is typically a little bit tighter. You're going to have to pay them more. However, you can typically charge more as well. So they're in the trades, it might be a chuck in the truck or your competitors. So these guys are tradesmen. They're not business people. So you can usually steal away employees from them. You can steal away competition from them because you're just running your business better. Or the next thing you want to look at in terms of like the science would be recession resistance. So either because it's a need or it's a low-cost want that people aren't going to do without, especially on the B2B side. So there are a few ways, right, to ensure your business is set up for minimal impact. Some industries are just historically resilient. Some home improvement might seem like they're nice to haves, but take, for example, bathroom renovations. They lost almost no steam during the last recession, even though you would think that people would stop renovating their bathrooms during that kind of time period. Other ones are location dependent. So they're in these high income areas that all the people who work there are working in these resilient industries. So they're going to spend their money on their children no matter what, or they're going to spend their money on whatever no matter what. Some of these need-based services could be things that they just have to get done, right? You have a backed up pipe, you have a flood in the basement, you got a raccoon in your attic. These are problems that have to get solved, and your customer's not going to solve them, so you will. The other ones are kind of like these low cost with really high rewards. They're like the last thing that people stop spending money on, especially in the B2B world. Okay, so take bookkeeping. Most business owners, they would rather like walk off a cliff than do their own books. So even if revenue is going down, they're not getting rid of their bookkeeper. Okay. So they could do it on their own. They certainly could, but the cost of a bookkeeper is usually a couple $100 a month, maybe 300 or 400 for a really good one. But that cost is considered very low compared to the amount of time it would take them to do it, as well as compared to the consequences if they did it wrong. So they're just not going to cut it. Okay. So that's another thing you need to think of in the science for that recession resistance. The next one we're going to talk about is competition growth. And this is going to be the last one. So you'll find competition in any business, right? Even niche businesses, right? And if you do find some niche that nobody else is doing it and you're making, amazing margins, someone's going to find out, and then other people are going to find out, and then you're going to have a bunch of competition. Okay. So really what we're looking at is the growth of the competition. So competition isn't bad. So when we're talking about growth of the competition, think, if my industry is growing 10% a year, but my competition is growing 50%, the pie is still getting smaller from a per competitor standpoint. So don't be put off by the sheer volume of competitors, because it also depends on the market size in your territory, right? Competition is good. It means there's money in it. There's no competition in your area. Someone probably tried it at some point and failed because there wasn't demand. So just make sure that the growth of the competition isn't outpacing the growth of the industry itself. Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about, like we have all these check marks, we have all these things, and it sounds like it's very intricate, and we're gonna have all the answers, but we're not. At some point, there's gonna be some ambiguity that you have to live with. It's just the fact of the matter. So you can get the answers to all of these questions, but you're gonna have more questions. You just can't know everything. Use the checklist that I've provided in the app. And once the boxes are ticked, you keep moving, right? These are all questions you can get answered to, but like I said, you're just not going to get every answer there to every possible scenario. No business was built on like a clairvoyant ability to see the future. So you're going to get enough information to make a decision, and then you keep moving, okay? And then when, not if, when something goes wrong, you're going to solve that problem with the information you have, and you're going to move on, right? So the information, even though it's a long video and it's a ton of information, it's not to get you stuck in analysis paralysis. In fact, honestly, this should do the opposite. By knowing that this is the information that you need, it should free you up to make a confident decision once you get all the information. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this is something that you're going to be able to use when you're going through the matching workbook that I have, because I'm going to ask all these questions of like what your preferences are for all these things, and you would have thought about it, and then we'll be able to find franchises on the first go round that are a great fit for you. All right. All right, just a quick informal reminder here that if you're interested in working with us, working with myself to find a good franchise, you can book time by going to tracerfranchising.com. You'll see more information as well as see a way to book some time with me so we can talk about franchising. And then we're going to be launching an app soon, so be on the lookout for that. There'll be a link on the website too. So even if you kind of want to do your own due diligence, you'll at least get the benefits of using the checklist and using all the questions that I've built out in a way to really easily save the answers and keep track of everything. Because whether you work with me or not, I want you to make a good decision. Okay, so I hope to hear from you. Let me know if you have any questions, or just email me directly if you just have something that you want to tell me, or any feedback for the show at josh@tracerfranchising.com. All right, talk to you next time.